the US and China are on the brink of a new Cold War. But who started it? And what are Western media getting wrong? Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Last week, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi warned the U.S. against taking the U.S. and China to the brink of a new Cold War. Yes, as the U.S. government increasingly calls out the Chinese Communist Party, there is growing concern among Western media over the idea of a new Cold War. For example, this article saying that a new Cold War could devastate the global economy. Why is it happening now? Well, it's because of the coronavirus pandemic. No, wait, it's because of Hong Kong. Look, the important thing is a new Cold War has begun. It's already underway. And who started this whole Cold War anyway? Did Trump ignite a Cold War with China to win the election? Or did the new Cold War start in Beijing? Look, the answer to that is clear. Everybody knows that whoever smelt it, dealt it. Unless whoever denied it, supplied it. Obviously. Now, the idea that the US and China are heading to or are already in some kind of Cold War isn't new. In fact, we did an episode on Cold War II almost 2 years ago when the CIA was talking about it. When the CIA was talking about it publicly. We don't have an inside man at the CIA. Anyway, there are a lot of opinions on this issue, but the most important thing to know is that the US doesn't need a new Cold War, because a Cold War with China would be a mistake. Look, no one wants a new Cold War, except maybe this guy. But many, although not all of these articles warning about a new Cold War, make the same fundamental mistakes. The first mistake is that they don't take what the Chinese Communist Party has said and done seriously. Take this Washington Post opinion piece. It acknowledges that the common wisdom that the US and China and their intertwined economies would inevitably get along is also fading. I wonder why. The piece mentions how China's entry into the World Trade Organization nearly 2 decades ago was once seen as a towering achievement of globalization. Then it suggests that the Trump administration considers that bad because Trump doesn't like the WTO. But the article fails to mention all of the ways that the Chinese Communist Party has constantly cheated and broken their promises since they joined the WTO. Through things like unfair trade practices, keeping out foreign competition, and forced technology transfer. This is the U.S. Trade Representative's 192-page report to Congress on China's WTO compliance. It concludes that a consistent pattern existed where the United States raised a particular concern, China specifically promised to address that concern, and China's promise was not fulfilled. But you know what? That's nothing to worry about. Because this Wall Street Journal opinion piece says that the US government is overstating China's ambitions and capabilities. Because Beijing isn't seeking to overturn the global order. Obviously. I mean, it's not like China has some kind of vision for the new world order. It's not like they have plans to win control of the global order just because, according to a leaked internal Chinese Communist Party directive, they see themselves as being in the midst of an intense ideological struggle for survival. Or because Chinese leader Xi Jinping made a speech about how the party must build a socialism that is superior to capitalism and lay the foundation for a future where we will win the initiative and have the dominant position. Does that even really mean anything? Xi Jinping is probably overstating China's ambitions. He's just full of hot air. The basic message from these Cold War articles is that a Cold War sounds scary. Nobody wants that, so we don't really need to confront China. Okay, maybe confront it a little bit, but not a lot, because our economies are intertwined, because we need to cooperate on the coronavirus, because we shouldn't upset the balance of the international order. Sure, the Chinese Communist Party is doing a bit of ethnic cleansing here and there, and militarizing islands in the South China Sea. But if we just continue with the same normal diplomacy we've used for decades, we can get them to stop. I mean, it hasn't worked so far, but you know what they say. 583rd time's the charm. You know who agrees with this perspective? The Chinese Communist Party. They don't like being challenged, and they know that the term Cold War brings up bad connotations. So they keep accusing the US and other countries that criticize them of having a Cold War mentality when it comes to trade, or the Hong Kong protests, or just, in general. I wonder if they ever get tired of repeating themselves. Anyway, the point is that when Chinese government officials criticize what they explicitly call a Cold War mentality in the US, they aren't calling for an end to ideological competition or great power rivalry, but rather to US attempts to stymie Beijing's plans. That's because, as I said earlier, the Communist Party does see itself in an ideological struggle for survival. That's clear from their own internal documents. Which brings me to the second mistake that many Western media are making in their Cold War articles. They're not taking the Trump administration's response to the Chinese Communist Party seriously. Look, regardless of how you feel about Trump as a person, it's important to look at what his administration is actually saying and doing about the Chinese Communist Party. Some media are just playing it off as something that's happening only because Trump needs a campaign issue more promising than the plummeting economy, or casting it as an attempt to prevent China's rise. So how is the US actually responding to the Chinese Communist Party? The Trump administration recently released a 16-page document explaining the United States' strategic approach to the People's Republic of China. It's worth a read, because when it comes to changing America's China policy, the Trump administration just let it rip. For one, the document specifically calls out the Chinese Communist Party, which they will hate. It also lays out how the party's actions threaten America's economy, security, and values. And it clearly says that this is an ideological struggle for the party. Given the strategic choices China's leadership is making, the United States now acknowledges and accepts the relationship with the PRC as the CCP has always framed it internally, one of great power competition. The administration states that the US is not trying to prevent China's rise, and that China's future can only be determined by the Chinese people themselves. But they're also clear that they're not going to accept how the Communist Party wants to frame things, calling out the CCP's attempts at false equivalency as well as Beijing's propaganda and false narratives that distort the truth and attempt to demean American values and ideals. The US will also respond to what the CCP actually does, not what it promises to do. And when quiet diplomacy proves futile, the United States will increase public pressure on the Chinese government and take action to protect United States interests by leveraging proportional costs when necessary. Wow! Like I said, the whole document is worth reading. So whether or not you want to call it a new Cold War, it's clear that the US is not backing down from an overall strategic approach to confronting the Chinese Communist Party. The question is, how will the party respond to the US government's tougher stance? After all, for years, they've managed to get their silent but deadly diplomacy past the rest of the world. And now, the US has lit a match. Now, it's time for me to answer a question from one of you, fans who contribute to China Uncensored through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Curtis L. Christensen asks, so I've noticed on many of your demonetized videos on YouTube still have ads. Who is getting this revenue if you guys aren't? Good question, Curtis. When YouTube demonetizes one of our videos, if you look at the fine print, it doesn't mean no ads, it means limited or no ads. There is still a small fraction of advertisers that don't mind being associated with controversial videos. We can't control which ads play in front of our videos. So if you're being haunted by purple mattress ads, we're sorry. But let's say we would normally get about $200 in ad revenue from a YouTube video. If it's demonetized with limited or no ads, we get only about $10. That's a big difference. And we can't have 4 people working for an entire day to produce one video for just $10. But we're not going to stop covering controversial topics like the coronavirus cover-up or Hong Kong, just because YouTube threatens to take away most of the ad revenue. We can afford to ignore demonetization because people like you, Curtis, contribute directly to China Uncensored through Patreon. So, thank you for your contribution, and thank you for your question. Be like Curtis and visit patreon.com/China Uncensored and support us with $1 or more per episode. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.